I'm Dennis Steigerwalt, President of the Housing Innovation Alliance, and I want to welcome everybody to our Industrialized Construction and Change Management Roundtable session. It's part of our third Tuesday series. We have an awesome series of panelists up with us today and two amazing facilitators that I'm proud to call friends and colleagues. But before we get into introducing more on the topic today and the players that'll be in the conversation, I want to give you a little bit more background about who we are at the Housing Innovation Alliance. So at the Alliance, we bring together the players and the solutions to help builders build better. We're focused on the production builders' operating environment and aim to leverage their market share to scale attainability. To do that, we deliver on what I call scan, stack, and share. Our team scans the market for new solutions and trends. Then we rack and stack these opportunities to create targeted tools and resources to benefit your business. Throughout our development, we focused on four key lenses to uncover these opportunities. One is, what are the business models, the people strategies, the product opportunities, and then the processes and systems that can bring it all together. At the heart of who we are is our network, and at the core of that network is our partners. And I want to thank every organization on this page for the contributions they've made to make our programming throughout the year possible and to make this session come to life, as well as all the tools and resources that come out of it. And I want to give even greater appreciation to the broader network for those, because those are the folks that are taking action on the content we create. So as we get into the conversation today, this is something that we've been working on for over the course, well over a year now. We started the discussion with Rich Binsacca from Professional Builder. We've brought a lot of other colleagues and members and experts along the way in the journey. And over the course of the past year, we've dug deeper through working groups, virtual sessions, to create tools and resources that allow businesses to better understand what does industrialized construction mean to their organization. More recently, we have engaged the group from the ABC Collaborative to help us intertwine with the programming that they're delivering on behalf of the Department of Energy. And again, leading into the tools and resources that we can create to better drive these solutions into the marketplace. Most recently, we've delivered an article in partnership with Professional Builder that helps explain what's happening for this market segment, what are the growth opportunities, and who's winning and how are they winning. Look, we know this conversation isn't new. It's had its fair share of fits and starts. But we believe that current market dynamics and emerging product categories such as build for rent make IC an important addition to the technology solution mix moving forward. So we appreciate your contributions over the past few months, your engagement today, and your continued feedback as we move forward. With that, just want to do some quick housekeeping and introduce our facilitators. So the whole point of this conversation today is for network engagement. It's all about bringing your questions to the table. You can do that as we're going through this conversation by entering your questions and comments into the chat box. When you do that, please make sure that you're sharing with everyone so that we all see it, not just the panelists. And we'll be sure to bring those questions up through a facilitation role that Diana Fisler will be playing. So with that, and before Rich Binsacca introduces all of our panelists, I want to introduce Rich. You know, he's been a good friend of the Alliance over his career, and he's the editorial director at Professional Builder Media. And we're excited to have him leading this conversation today. Also supporting Rich will be Diana Fisler, principal at ADL Ventures and our program champion at the ABC Collaborative. Rich and Diana, thanks for joining us. Look forward to having Diana facilitate the questions from the audience. And Rich, I'm going to hand the mic and let you run with it.
All right. Thanks, Dennis. Appreciate that. As Dennis mentioned, we've been working with the Alliance on this for well over a year. I'm a big fan and have covered IC or offsite or factory built, whatever you want to call it, for most of my career, actually, as a housing journalist. And I think there's opportunities now, and with the working group that we've formed and the discussions we've had and some of the content we've created, I think there's a real opportunity now for that to, hopefully break through a little bit more than what it has in the past 20, 25 years in the housing industry. So I'm happy to facilitate this session. We've got some great panelists that are going to talk specifically about some of the barriers that we've heard from our working group, the barriers to adopting industrialized construction practices, and how builders can manage those, how they can either overcome them or work around them or adjust their thinking and their approach to accommodate them. So that's kind of our focus today, is to talk about those barriers and really kind of bring them into the light and get some answers from folks who are on the front lines and are perceived as maybe being some of those barriers, but also folks that have solutions that are going to help builders work through them. So I'm going to introduce our panelists, and then we'll just kind of start with a Q&A, kind of a question for each of them, dealing with their specific realm of the topic. And then, as Dennis said, Daniel will take over with some of your questions, and we hope that you'll be active in asking questions about for our panelists. So the first up, we have Ryan Colker, who is the VP of Innovation at the International Code Council, or ICC. He was the founding staff director of the National Institute of Building Sciences Offsite Construction Council, and currently coordinates the offsite construction activity at ICC. Next up, we have Jeff Hoffenbeck, who is the founder of Simple Homes in Denver. And after following a career path that was outside of the housing industry, he is now realizing a dream of actually building homes for a living. So we're glad to have Jeff with us, and Jeff brings a deep passion for innovation and technology, and he'll let him kind of explain what Simple Homes is. I don't want to presume that I know any better than he does about how to explain Simple Homes, but doing some really creative, innovative stuff. Next is Rick Lambert, who's the VP of Operations at McStain Neighborhoods, also in Denver, and actually McStain is working with Simple Homes on some IC production for a couple of its projects. And Rick is responsible for the construction and architecture permitting and purchasing aspects at McStain. He oversees the entire kind of design, bid, build process that they go through on their projects. And then obviously, as most builders are, has a passion for delivering great homes for people and their families. We also have Craig Webb, who is the president of Webb Analytics. I've known Craig for a long time, used to work for him, actually, when he was the editor-in-chief at Pro Sales Magazine, which was an exclusive magazine for the Pro Sales lumber and building materials dealer network and industry. And Craig has kept that network alive by serving them with content and advice and news and information, and really just kind of the loudest voice, certainly, perhaps maybe the only voice for that industry. And so he brings a lot of not just industry knowledge, but contacts and insight into how LBMs are working these days, and specifically to this IC question. Lastly, we have Nathan Young, who is the CEO and principal builder of Mods PDX in Portland, Oregon. I had the opportunity to visit Mods PDX a few years ago and talk with Nathan. Really just a very cool operation, 60,000 square feet of space under roof, where they build basically frame modules, stick frame modules. But the efficiencies that they achieve there are pretty remarkable. And he's kind of when we wrote the story about him, it was kind of the framer who went modular, and that's Nathan's kind of story. So I'm not sure he's with us quite yet, but hopefully he'll come into the room and we can kind of pepper him with some questions about his experience. So without further ado, we'll get into the discussion, actually. And my first question is to Rick. And because I think as a builder, I'm interested in kind of your perspective on the general question of barriers that you or maybe you've heard about from other builders to adopting industrialized construction offsite. Can you tell us your experience in that regard and kind of where you've seen some roadblocks and maybe the ways that you've been able to kind of overcome them?
Yeah, sure. So, this has been the industrialized construction's been a topic around the industry for as long as I've been in it. And we've looked at it a few times, at McStain. I've looked at it elsewhere, and I think what it always came down to was the issue of cost, right? And so, as you're looking out towards how you're going to build out a project, you're getting your bids together, you're, evaluating those. the tricky part was always that the offsite solution, there was never a cost savings there, right? And from the builder's perspective, we know anytime we try something new, we're going to pay the dump tax, right? And so a lot of times, I think there's a hesitancy to really jump into the offsite construction unless you can see a true cost savings. And in all candor, I don't know that at a wide scale we're quite there yet to where we're able to get some of the labor concessions that you'd like to see from the crews, and just some of the other cost savings that I think are to come, and there's the potential for. But in the early stages, it certainly isn't an obvious cost savings to going to offsite construction. And so the path we ended up finally making the jump down was with Jeff and Simple Homes. I think that's a critical component that we sort of learned is in order to make it make sense, you really needed to build a partnership with whoever it was that you were going to be framing with. And so that's what we did with Jeff. I mean, there's a relationship with Jeff and our company from many years old. And so as he started up his Simple Homes, we started having conversations. And I think transparency between organizations was key. We were pretty transparent with them about sort of what we had in our budgets for framing for the project that we're working together on. I think Jeff has done a great job on their end of being transparent with us on, here's what we're hearing from crews on labor costs, sharing material costs, all that sort of thing. And so, I mean, that was the first big hurdle for us as a builder, I think, to just even getting the process started, right? And making that commitment to, all right, we're going to build this project, we're going to build it offsite, we're going to bring panels in, we're going to frame things that way. So, biggest hurdle to begin with. And then, of course, you get into the nitty gritty of, all the brain damage that comes along with any sort of construction, but any change in process is always going to introduce unforeseen issues. But, really from the builder's perspective, taking that first jump, figured out a way to make it pencil in your pro forma, and then just going down the path and working through the issues, seeing the benefits, and just being a part of the process.
Right. And was it a situation where you looked at it, you found a project, and obviously working with Simple Homes, and knowing your pipeline for work coming, projects coming down the line, of saying, what would be the best project to kind of, I don't want to say get our feet wet, but basically kind of try this, and then saying, well, of the ones that you maybe have coming up that you're thinking about using an offsite or industrialized solution, this might be the best one. Was there that kind of conversation, or did you have something in mind? And I know you still stick framing. There's other stuff that you're doing, but this one is one that you're working with Simple on. Yeah.
So the way that conversation came to be, I mean, we've had a few projects that were going on at the time that talks got real serious with Simple Homes. And yeah, I mean, to your point, we looked around at the projects that we had going on and said, all right, what would make the most sense here? And it was, a little kismet, really. I mean, we had just kicked off a project here in Aurora, Colorado that was, smaller lots, narrow lots, alley loaded, single family detached product. And it was, there's 4 plans, a couple elevations, so not a ton of different iterations, not a lot of different options. And that seemed like the obvious choice for us. I mean, we do a lot of semi-custom sort of stuff, bigger homes, that sort of thing. And when we look at the panelized process, it certainly wasn't where we wanted to start, right? It wasn't the project that we wanted to kick off with Simple. And so this one that we're working with them on made a whole lot of sense for just a lot of different reasons. And as luck would have it, it was, I guess, had the most run rate out ahead of us. So it gave us the most opportunity to build the most homes with them. But yeah, certainly, you got to look at the product that you're looking to offer. And, at least in my opinion, if you're trying to smooth the road a little bit, a product where you don't expect to make a bunch of custom changes, you don't have a lot of topography on your lots, and a huge variety of plans, certainly makes the most sense. And then, we got the added benefit of, working on these tight lots where there's not a whole lot of room to bring lumber packs and store them on site. Jeff and his team, they bring out their panels on a truck, crane them in place. And so it actually was really beneficial for the sort of project that we're working with them on.
Right. Thank you. That's great. And I think one of the things that we've learned in this working group and just in kind of listening to builders and talking to them is that, I think that the thought was maybe initially, maybe a generation ago, that industrialized construction would be something that a builder might move to comprehensively. And really what we're hearing is, you got to kind of pick and choose what's right. You got to, if you're going to get into this, pick a project or pick a house or whatever that makes the most sense to kind of, at least, like you said, kind of pay that dumb tax a little bit and kind of work through the process. And then kind of see, how it does pencil out and what kind of learning curve there is, or cost learning curve there is, to kind of get those costs aligned with stick framing. So thank you. I appreciate that. Jeff, I want to then jump to you, because you are partnering with McStain and have forged that partnership. So I have a couple questions, but one, maybe the first thing is just to explain kind of what Simple does and where you find or kind of offer some of those cost savings, and how you respond to that resistance, if you will, from builders that you might work with.
Yeah, so we are a relatively young company. We're based in Denver. We are a turnkey offsite framer. So we've got a manufacturing facility, part of which you can kind of see behind me, where we fabricate all of our own components, and then we provide a turnkey install service as well. So we provide field labor and all the field framing labor there. Most of our business is working with folks like McStain, GCs, home builders here in Colorado, where we are really a turnkey offsite framing solution. We also have a architecture side of our business where we're designing and developing kind of pre-designed models that are really optimized for our offsite solution. Within kind of the offsite space, so we build using a panelized building system, very large format wall panels with framing, sheathing, with integrated weather barrier pre-installed, windows and doors pre-installed in the shop. We ship all of that vertically. We build floor cassettes as well, some kind of porch and other kind of like small volumetric sections. And in doing that, our focus more than anything is on speed, and really getting, our customers, our goal on a lot of projects is, for a single family home to be dried in a day. So, yeah, we've been working with McStain now for, kind of year and a half, 2 years, and then building a lot of other products really all across the Denver metro area and really all across Colorado at this point.
Okay, terrific, thanks. And I think one of the things that we've heard from builders and others, folks that are keeping an eye on this segment of the industry, is that, and what's interesting is that you're focusing on housing. What we hear a lot of is from kind of legacy providers, panelizers, modular companies that have not waited for the housing industry to kind of get the clue or to kind of really engage them. They've moved to commercial work or even multifamily. We can get some economies of scale. You can get some repeatability. And so the question or the concern that's come up is that there just isn't the capacity, despite the fact that there are a number of plants nationwide. I know the Alliance keeps the heat map of these providers nationally, but that they're just either not interested or not able to kind of work in a single family home client or customer because they're plenty busy serving multifamily and commercial. And I know that that's not what you do, but I'm curious if you have a perspective on that.
Yeah, so we actually, we've kind of worked our way up the food groups. We started doing a lot of really small kind of like backyard projects along with my co-founder, who's a home builder, and had kind of built a niche in the ADU space, then moved our way to work with McStain on a bunch of single family projects, then moved into townhomes, and then now we've moved into multifamily as well. And multifamily will be a much larger portion of our kind of mix going forward. Okay. I think what you've heard is absolutely correct. I think as a kind of offsite provider with limited capacity, all of us have limited capacity. Multifamily is very attractive, both because of the kind of economies of scale that we get within those projects. The fact that those customers are often willing to pay a bit more for the solution because the savings, that time saving a couple months on a large multifamily project of frame time is very real dollars. Right. And whereas, I think in a single family context, on an individual house, saving a couple weeks on frame time, 3 weeks on frame time, whatever it is, that individual house, frankly, doesn't matter that much. The only way that you realize those benefits as a builder generally is scale. So within a community, if you're building dozens of homes in a year, and you can potentially get in a couple more homes than you would have otherwise. So I think that what you heard there in terms of a barrier is very much real. I do think, the interesting thing to look at is the markets and the places in the country where the majority, if not, or a lot of single family homes are built using kind of offsite or industrialized solutions. You've got Rainy Construction down in Orlando, who's building thousands per year for all the big builders using kind of similar stuff that we build. You've got Carpentry Contractors of America, who builds, pretty complex components as well, in 3 big markets in Illinois, North Carolina, and Florida. So it does happen, and there's sort of niches where it's happening, but it really then comes, it's not kind of across the country, and it really largely depends on kind of the market dynamics so far of those individual places.
Right. Thank you for that perspective. I appreciate that. And I'm going to jump to Craig now, because that's another source of some offsite components, some factory built, whether it's roof trusses, plated roof trusses, or certainly wall panels, even some floor cassettes or floor panels from the LBM side of the business. And Craig, I remember the Pro Sales 100 and when you ranked the top pro sales lumber yards, LBM dealers in the country, and one of the things that you asked on your survey was, whether they were offering installed sales and for what types of products they were offering that, and then also if they offered manufactured components or factory built components. I haven't seen that list in a while, obviously, but I think that it was always interesting to me to see how that was evolving. Maybe you can kind of give us a brief, update on where the LBM industry is on factory built components, such as roof trusses and wall panels, in terms of capacity and supply, and then also, the installed sales aspect of that operation, or that side of the operation.
Sure. First, thank you for the opportunity to spend time with so many smart people in 1 hour. The industry is increasingly engaged in providing many of the raw sort of supplied materials that would go into a place, not just the sticks, but the trusses, the wall panels, and the like. The Pro Sales 100 has now been succeeded by what I do now at Webb Analytics, which is called the Construction Supply 150. So we're 50% bigger. About half of the building material dealers do some sort of custom work, construction of some sort on behalf of the builder. And that could be doing trusses, wall panels, as well as custom moldings and the like. Half of them also do some sort of installation, frequently windows, doors, countertops, cabinets, what you might call the more complicated parts of the construction process, as opposed to just banging together some 2x4s. There's also the increase in products like ReadyFrame. A lot of dealers across the country are pre-cutting the wood so that you can put it together in erector sets. So basically, this is happening for 2 reasons. The first is because customers want it. There's not enough builders. They finally believe that there's an opportunity there to do that. The second is because you can charge a little bit more than you do for a load of 2x4s if you put it together in a truss. So consequently, they're getting much more involved in those things. They are active partners, basically, in the construction of the house just as much as any sub is.
Right. Okay. Great. Thank you for that that kind of update into that, and it leads me to the question of that partnership that you're talking about, because we've written about and we've had some columnists write about, the role of the lumber dealer who offers these kind of components, or really anything, but specifically to this, to work with a builder to better understand the total cost of construction, how you kind of price that properly, and in addition to other ways that a builder can save on construction costs and reduce waste and things like that. Just kind of really truly having a collaboration, really truly having a partnership with your dealer. How do you advise lumber dealers to work with builders in that regard? How aggressive should they be? How kind of upfront should they be about where the builder can help them, and in turn they can help the builder kind of achieve lower costs and better building?
Well, the relationships that builders have or the dealers have with their builders range from some lumber yards actually have sales reps who have offices in the builder's home office. They're that tight. To other people who send a list for bids on products, and they only look at the total price at the bottom. I've even heard of builders who are building multi-story buildings who bid out the products for the first, second, and third floors, and then did another bid for the fourth, fifth, and sixth floors, and then another bid for the seventh, eighth, and ninth floors, because they were that focused on just caring about price. Dealers, I tend to argue that dealers are the centers of construction excellence in their communities, because nobody knows more about what works in the area, what the best products are, what the local weather conditions are like, what the local inspectors are like, usually than the building material dealer. Whether the builder wants to hear that is a different thing. Clearly number 1 studs are better than number 3 studs, but if you're in Houston, you're probably going to build with number 3. And if that's what the builder wants, that's what you're going to supply.
Right. Okay. Thanks. I appreciate that. So I'm going to jump to Ryan now. Unfortunately, Nathan's not with us, and hopefully we can kind of, as part of this, maybe make available the article that we wrote about Nathan and Mod's PDX, because I think it explains a lot about the efficiencies that he's realized as a framer, but also bringing the perspective of a framer, someone who's been a stick framer, still does some stick framing on site, but really is focusing most of his efforts on this kind of stick framing modules under roof. But I do want to talk to Ryan, because one of the things that we've heard occasionally from the working group that's involved in this IC debate or this conversation towards developing a roadmap is that they run up against some code and local zoning jurisdiction problems and inability to get approvals, inability to get code officials to understand or building inspectors to understand what they're doing. And I know that you're in charge of kind of this segment at ICC, which is really great. And I know that you've got some new things that have come out. So I want to kind of give you an opportunity to respond to, is that a real or perceived kind of barrier that builders have, or and also kind of what ICC is doing to maybe address some of this evolution, if you will, toward IC.
Yeah, and certainly appreciate the opportunity to chat a little bit about this. I think the sort of challenges that folks may have, with codes or code departments, I think is certainly localized. And so, you could have communities that have, extensive experience with offsite construction. They know how the process works. They know sort of who to go to and who to talk to, to get those types of projects approved. There are other localities where, maybe they're experiencing their first, sort of offsite construction project, and, going through it with the builders hand in hand and sort of figuring out, what is acceptable, what's going to work. And so, the Code Council really recognized, some of the challenges that, particularly within the building code and the code community on, how do you address this, offsite construction thing? Many times it doesn't sort of fit neatly, within the building code that was designed for, sort of a site-built world. And so we're really working through the development of tools that support, both code officials, manufacturers, and builders in really taking advantage of offsite construction. So really looking at a few different areas, for, some of the offsite construction products that, do not fit sort of neatly within a code provision. we have a product evaluation service that can evaluate, those products, relative to, existing codes and standards, or if one doesn't exist for that product, really sort of figure out, what are the best qualities or performance requirements for that, test the product, and provide an evaluation report, which, a manufacturer can bring to a code official and say, look, this has been evaluated by, the ICC evaluation service, and it does meet, the requirements within the code. But when you also get to things like closed construction, full volumetric modules, you have to shift that inspection process back into the factory. And many, local code officials are sort of concerned, does that mean it actually complies, with the codes, in my area? And so we've actually released 2 new standards that support that process. So standard 1200 focuses on the design, fabrication, and assembly process for offsite construction. So really sort of setting up that ability to prove your compliance, with the code, providing some assurance to local code officials on that end. And then standard 1205, which looks at the planning, the permitting, and inspection process. So, what is the requirement for manufacturers to show that they are complying with components of the building code? They have a quality assurance program in place, and really provide, local code officials, state code departments, with that verification, so they know that they're, meeting the needs of the community.
Right. And are those standards currently available? Like if I went to the ICC website or something, I could find that, and if I was a builder or just as a journalist looking to maybe report on it?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you really want a hard copy, you can go to the ICC bookstore. If you want to just take a look at them, you can just go to codes.iccsafe.org and put in standard 1200 or standard 1205, and you can read them for free.
Great. Okay, thanks. And so that's terrific. And to know that there is a group at ICC, which I didn't know until I reached out to your colleagues and asked, is there somebody that can be on this panel for us? That's really great news, because I think it's great news for builders and for code officials to kind of have something they can look at and refer to and share and collaborate on and say, this is something that's coming from, the ICC. This isn't just me or you. This is real stuff. So that's terrific. And I want to kind of jump back to Rick and then to Jeff also on this topic. Rick, as a builder, obviously you deal with, code issues and zoning issues and things like that. When you were considering the project in Aurora with Simple, was there a conversation with that local jurisdiction about this, or how did you approach that? Or did you feel like it was a barrier you really needed to address?
Yeah, I mean, of course, we discussed it with them because, as Ryan noted, I mean, there's a different inspection process here, and the panels that we're getting from Simple Homes, the way they're building those for us in their factory, it's the wall panels, and they're installing windows, getting all those taped and flashed. We use a product with integrated weather barrier, and so they're taping the seams between those exterior panels as well. So one of the concerns that we got from the cities was wanting to see how those windows were nailed in, and also wanting to see shear nailing patterns on the exterior sheathing itself. Some of those items were certainly of a concern for the city as we kind of brought this to their attention that we wanted to do this. We did have some conversations around having inspections done at Simple Homes factory, maybe even bringing in a consulting company, a code compliance company to do the inspections for us. And, it just felt like that was a little more complicated than we necessarily wanted to go down at that point in time. So what we settled on, we basically, met with the city, and of course on the first couple builds, all eyes are on us, right? And they're looking for every single detail. They want to make sure everything's exactly as installed. I mean, they went over these first couple builds, I think, Jeff, with a fine-tooth comb, and I don't blame them, right? I mean, they wanted to see that we were going to do what we said we did. And like anything, I think as time moved on and their inspectors in the field, became more familiar with what we were doing. I think they started to get on board and see the benefits, and, there was less of a microscope on us, but certainly, kicking off this new process where, it's going to potentially shift around some of their inspections. Yeah, we had to talk to the city, and, I think that relationship's gone well, but I certainly could see how, there's the opportunity for that to go less well, depending on either the municipality or the product that you're putting out there.
Right. Right. Thank you. That's terrific insight. And Jeff, I want to talk to you about that process from your perspective of getting, people into your factory, or actually how, if you could just walk us through kind of how that actually came to be, when and how often, and to what extent did you have folks kind of wandering around your factory looking at what you're doing?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I really think it all comes down to sort of building trust-based relationships. I mean, whether that's how we all want to be doing business, and it's how business works. And,
Yeah.
and I think it's no different with code officials and the municipalities that we work with. So, what we did, with Aurora, with McStain, and really what we do when we're entering into any kind of new municipality in a meaningful way is, we'll invite the building officials to our factory. We'll give them a tour of how we build, of the tools we're using on the technology side to ensure quality. We'll bring them to job sites that we've got underway right now to say, here's the process. Here's where it's a little bit different versus your normal inspection process, and work with them to try and figure out how we get there. I think Aurora was a good example where, we did that, and I think they really wanted to really focus on those first few projects. So those first few projects we delivered, we didn't tape the seams in our factory. We didn't pre-install windows in the factory because they really wanted to make sure that, those nailing patterns were dead on. So we did that for a couple, then we were able to get them to sign off on installing windows and covering up those nail patterns. And then ultimately to tape everything. I think something I'm proud of there is that we, by the end had, their I think second in command come out and really tell us that he was going to build a house in Aurora, and he'd want it framed by us because the quality was the best he'd seen. And so
That's awesome.
That's really how, I think that's how we, you just have to enter into it. And that sort of like that level of collaboration, building trust, like showing, the benefits to the code official as well, like you can to your customers. That's, I think the only way we ultimately do kind of move the industry forward is by working together to make that happen.
Great. Thank you. Appreciate that. Okay. I'm going to kind of end my time. I'm going to pass it over to Diana. I know we've got a number of questions from the audience, and she's got some questions as well for our panelists. So I'm going to turn it over to her. And again, thanks guys. This was terrific. Great insight. I think it's a real step forward for us in this process in developing a roadmap for builders. So thank you for that. And with that, I'll leave it with Diane.
Great. Thank you so much, Rich. We have actually a couple interesting questions in the chat already. Please, audience, feel free to put additional questions in there. First of all, for Jeff, where did you get your install crew? The question is whether those were traditional stick framers who decided to embrace panelization, or were they people who came new to the field? And also, are they employees or are they contractors?
So for us, really, the answer is kind of all of the above. When we were first really getting going, we were actually using all of our own crews and our own employees, just because of that barrier that I think we all know in terms of adoption, and there's some risk there for existing framers. We today have a pretty wide mix. So we install a fair amount with our own crews, both employees and some subcontract independent contractors there. And then we do work with a couple of kind of mid-sized framing subs here in Denver. And I think, I guess not to sound like a broken record, but I think it all comes down to building trust, with the more established framing subcontractors that we work with. you know, for them, that, you know, that first project's key. So saying, all right, here's, and figuring out from a contractual standpoint, how we can de-risk it for everyone. You know, we've done projects where we've just kind of paid folks hourly, even through a larger framing sub, just to basically say, you know, here's the actual time savings on site, and we're not trying to cheat you or your guys out of anything. Let's get to a place that makes sense. And then as we've, you know, gotten a couple reps in with those subs, you know, in that kind of contractual relationship, we then are able to shift to more of a fixed price lump sum contract, because they know that, all right, if I'm, you know, taking a 30%, 40% less on my frame labor bid, you know, the guys are not going to get screwed. I'm not going to get screwed. And I'm going to make the same amount of money per day as I would have otherwise. So again, I think it really comes down to, you know, figuring out how to get creative to kind of get over that hurdle. And then ultimately it has to make sense for everyone.
Awesome, thank you. I think the second question that's in the chat kind of touches on a similar question, and we don't have Nathan here, so I'm going to throw this out to the whole group, including Rick. It has to do again with how subcontractors react to the opportunity, whether sort of uniformly you're seeing a lot of buy-in to IC, but then I think also what's in it for them, in addition to dragging them along into IC, what advantages may they see to their business? Because I think that's even more powerful than don't be scared of this. There are hidden advantages to going with IC for subcontractors. Could any of you comment on that?
I can jump in a little because you know, I think one of the advantages that Jeff's group has, at least as far as, you know, when we've looked out and considered going panelized, is they do control the labor. You know, we've spoken with other outfits who, you know, want to put together panels, they'll get them delivered to the site, but then they want to leave it, you know, it's on the builder to find the crews to assemble it. And, you know, as we've looked at that process, that's a tough sell for a builder. Just the amount of training. I mean, you know, we don't want to be out there trying to, you know, pitch crews and our individual stick framers on, you know, well, yeah, they're going to deliver these panels to the site and you're going to put them together. It's going to work great. We're all going to make more money. It's difficult for us on the builder side to do that. And so that's where I think, you know, the what Jeff's doing, where they're controlling the labor. I mean, that's, I wouldn't do it any other way as a builder, as far as at least at this point in time, because it's very hit or miss. I mean, I think, Jeff, you could probably speak to it because you've talked to more individual crews than obviously we have, but you know, I think some crews are probably, you know, or do the math for them. And I think what it comes down to is, you know, in a given month, if they can do more homes and they make a little less per home, but then at the end of the month, they're making more money that month, I think that's where the sales pitch probably comes in. And I know there's got to be a way for the math to work to where that can be the case, and it can really be a true win-win for everybody. But there's certainly all sorts of crews out there that, you know, we're busy now. I mean, things are booming. There's a labor shortage as is. Why do I got to come out and deal with some brain damage and learn a new way to frame? I'm good. I've got work, you know, all the work I can handle. I don't have the appetite for it. And so I think we've seen, you know, that whole range of responses as we've gone out there and looked. And I suspect that's probably, you know, pretty much what you're going to hear in most places from, you know, the folks actually out there, you know, doing the work.
Yeah. I think kind of adding on to that, you know, I think in our experience and, you know, speaking with, you know, a lot of other framers all across the country, you know, I think that transition almost always comes down to labor availability. And that is the place where, you know, I do think the more industrialized method like really have a substantial advantage. You know, if you look at a lot of the largest on the multifamily side, the largest, you know, framing subcontractors, even in whether that's in a given market or some of the national folks who kind of float around, you know, they have adopted almost entirely, you know, wall panels. They're trying to buy floor cassettes. They're, you know, trying to push on the edge of prefabrication. And really for them, it comes down to labor. And within a multifamily context where you all of a sudden have to spin up a very large crew to get a job done, if you can make that crew a little bit smaller, that is hugely beneficial to you. You know, and I even think then in the single family context as well, you know, if you're talking to an individual crew, you know, they may not want to take the risk on potentially earning a little less money. You know, there's a risk there that, you know, yes, we can sell on the fact that you'll do more houses and you'll make more, you know, make the same or more, but there's risk there. And if you're doing good work and you're making money, there's not a lot of impetus to change. The places with, you know, individual crews or kind of smaller subs where we've seen adoption is folks who are trying to grow, you know, who maybe have one crew or two crews right now and they want to have 3 or 4. But labor is constrained, and so they're having a hard time doing that. That's where we can really forge, I think, some really great partnerships and have been able to do that because they can also, it also does allow them to somewhat de-skill those crews a little bit as well. You know, they could, you know, instead of 4 pretty talented framers, you maybe can have, you know, 1 more general labor or have 2 general labor and 2 skilled framers. Kind of shift that mix and shift your cost basis to be able to have it make sense.
Rich, do you have a comment on this question?
I just wanted to kind of, if I could, speak for Nathan a little bit, and really again, just back to my visit to his shop and a couple of things that he pointed out. And again, that he was a framer that took his business inside and basically is stick framing in that context in an indoor kind of facility. Not highly automated. They've obviously got saws and cranes and things that move things around, but basically, you know, stick framing under roof. And so he needed to attract stick framers. And you know, the kind of things that made sense to them eventually was that, you know, they frame every floor of a townhouse. There's a 3-story townhouse that they're framing. Every floor of that townhouse is built on the factory floor. It's not built, you know, like it is on site where you start climbing up and you're on a 3rd floor of a townhouse and X feet above the ground. So there's a safety issue there that seems to be attractive, and you can get a lot more, you know, you're a lot safer building in that kind of context. The other thing was, you know, from a weather standpoint, in Portland, we get a lot of rain. You know, the site can be a little dangerous, but also just not very fun. And I think for framers, you know, if you can frame under roof and, you know, go into the building in the morning, come out in the afternoon after work, and you know, you're done for the day without having to suffer some of the Pacific Northwest rain, I think you're probably attracted to that. And these are minor things, obviously, you know, you're going to get paid fairly and all of that. But I think that the other thing was simply that you just don't have to spend time rolling up and rolling out at the end and the beginning of each day. There's about 45 minutes on each end that you might save. They just drop their tools and walk out of the building and then pick them up in the morning. So there's none of this lost time where you're basically kind of staging and getting ready and then cleaning up for the day. So I just want to kind of throw that out there, that those were some of the things that he's been able to use to attract framers to his operation. So I just thought I'd mention that.
I guess just to quickly pile onto that, just because I think Richie hit on a kind of tailwind that I think we are seeing in the market, which is really on the safety side. You know, you know, framing in particular has been pretty Wild West forever. You know, the things you see in you know, residential communities in terms of safety are frequently just appalling. And that I do believe is changing, at least in our market here. You're seeing an increased presence of OSHA, increased focus on tie-offs, increased focus on fall risk, increased focus on all of that. And I think with that, there is some very real benefit of more industrialized methods, whether that's panels or boxes or whatever. You know, we integrate tie-offs into our floor cassettes. We, you know, we'll get all the walls stood up in a matter of, you know, minutes or hours so that we don't have to, you know, put up any kind of temporary fencing around. I do think that as there is more of a focus on safety, as there very much should be, you're going to see some increased adoption of kind of more industrialized methods of construction.
And I think, picking up on that from the code council perspective, I mean, code officials are all about safety. And so recognizing, the potential for offsite, to contribute on job site safety is one thing. One other thing that Rich brought up that I think is important to note is, the sort of factory setting for offsite construction really opens up, opportunities for, new folks within the construction industry who wouldn't think about, sort of working out in the open, on the third floor, of a townhouse under construction. And so, really sort of diversifying the workforce, I think, is a huge opportunity. And I think it also sort of opens up, opportunities for younger folks in particular who may not have thought of, the construction workforce as, potential outlet. And now, you can have, a wide variety of sort of different levels of automation and cool tools that, now you can use in a factory setting. The other sort of piece is the sustainability and quality piece. So you can be sort of much more deliberate about, how you use materials in an offsite construction setting. You have less spoilage. You don't have to sort of keep materials out, in the rain and the snow. And so, that's certainly another, benefit that we've seen as well.
Terrific. Thanks, guys. Great conversation. This conversation, the thing you mentioned about opportunity for materials, Ryan, that's kind of close to my heart. So I'm going to throw in a question that I had for Craig. I have this idea that distributors, dealers may have the opportunity to influence the highlighting of new innovations in materials and the selection and availability of those. Do you see any opportunities for innovation that can be highlighted by distributors or dealers?
Well, innovations actually appear all the time. At the same time, it's sort of like the growing of a tree. You really don't notice year after year that it's gotten one ring bigger than it did the year before. But if you start going back to, what we were building 100 years ago, before we had plaster, before drywall, we did not have we did not have hardy siding or wraparound devices and the like. We're inventing new stuff all the time. One thing I should point out, and I would recommend everyone go to this fellow. He has a column on Substack called Construction Physics. His name is Brian Potter. And one of the things he pointed out recently was innovation does not necessarily happen as much as we would like in construction because the rewards are incremental, but the penalties are catastrophic. And so consequently, failure to come up with a new product or failure when a new product fails, the penalties are so much worse than the savings or the time or the benefits you get that it leads to a lot of fear. And so there is that to be factored in. Now that said, literally new products do get invented all the time, and just what Jeff was referring to and Rick were referring to in terms of the way they were constructing things, some of the products they were using, their fathers were not using. So it does happen. Now, in my question, I would go back to you though. What are you thinking that ought to be innovative that they're not using now?
I think that's right. And I think, while we're all hungry for innovation, I think innovation doesn't have to be quite as dramatic as all that, right? It doesn't always have to be full on modular with, the bedding already in it. And so we downplay the small innovation.
And to that end, let me point out that, a quarter of the houses in this country still don't have trusses, or they don't have factory built trusses. Wall panel use in this country is still very, very, very low. And I'm sure it's the same way up in Canada. So we got a long way to go there just to get to those sorts of things. And they would make life a little easier even if we just, went to those innovations.
Great. I want to answer the question that just came up that Dennis delivered, asking about, because I'm in Colorado, asking how Colorado is responding to modular in terms of inspection and codes and that kind of thing. And Ryan, it actually plays into a larger question I have, which is how much variety is there, do you think, in acceptance across the country for different municipalities, different counties? You know, are there some places that are super resistant to IC while others are ready to embrace it? Is it correlated with the lack of affordable housing? What are you guys seeing out there? And then particularly, how is Colorado responding to IC?
Yeah, so I can certainly start with that one. You know, just as we have a wide variety of building codes adopted throughout the country, we have sort of different pathways that states and localities deal with offsite construction. So about 35 states have statewide programs where all of the offsite construction components that are closed construction go through those statewide programs. And then, you know, the offsite construction components are delivered, you know, to the local site, basically with a label that says, you know, the state has approved these, and all the local inspector really needs to do is just check that label is there, and then any of the sort of on-site assembly, you know, is the purview of the local code official. Of course, there's even variations within those statewide programs, but many of those have been around since the 70s. So there's been, you know, sort of a mechanism to be able to do that. You know, I think in, you know, states like Colorado who don't have a statewide program, the entire offsite construction sort of verification process falls to local code officials. And so, you know, you can imagine if a you know, factory is 100 miles away, you know, in the next state, they really have no mechanism to be able to, you know, really evaluate what's going on in that factory. And so, you know, sometimes third parties, plan reviewers and inspection agencies can be sort of that intermediary, but sometimes it just really presents a challenge for communities. One, you know, really quick example. Actually, the first community to adopt the two new standards is Salt Lake City. So Salt Lake City had a requirement that you know, any project within the city, you know, whether that's offsite or onsite, needs to be inspected by local Salt Lake City employees. At the same time, they had a requirement within their travel regulations that you know, code officials could not leave the jurisdiction, and so, you know, unless you were you know, building offsite construction, you know, in a factory in Salt Lake City, it was essentially, you know, banned from the jurisdiction. And so they saw a need for, you know, a process whereby they could, you know, start to approve, you know, offsite construction projects. And so, you know, they were the first ones to really look at the standards as a tool to be able to do that.
Amazing. There was a question lingering for a while about build for rent. And how that might represent an opportunity for increasing IC. Not sure if anybody wants to take on commenting on that, perhaps Rich?
Well, if I can just point out one thing that I think is very important to the general discussion of industrialized construction. A person that Rich knows that he used to work with as well as me, said that he learned long ago that there really are two types of construction. You either start with a buyer and you find a builder, or you start with a builder and then you try to find somebody to buy what you've built. If you start with the customer, you end up with custom homes that take a lot of time. The builders have to work very, very closely with that customer, and the customer constantly changes his or her mind about what they want. If you start with a home, or if you start with the builder and then find the home, then price becomes very important, and the ability to do things efficiently becomes very important, and you can standardize things. So when we talk about what is the future of construction in the United States, if you take out custom built homes, you're taking out about 20% of all the homes built in America. Now let's go back to build for rent. Build for rent is a place where you start with a builder and then you go find a customer. So does it have a potential in industrialized construction? Yes, I think it does. And it's likely to have simpler projects, simpler trusses, more things going in that direction.
Right.
So yes, now, when you consider all the housing stock in America that's currently available for rent and the number of home flippers out there, and big and small, how big can build for rent ever become as a percentage of it all? People are thinking maybe 5%. Is that enough? Is that enough to cause an industry to flourish? I don't know.
Right.
I guess I can provide a little bit of,
please.
right, just because we're playing in the space. I think, the short answer to your question is absolutely yes. I think that this is a place where, different kinds of industrialized construction methods make a lot of sense. And I think the biggest driver for that is time. That in terms of the benefits of offsite construction, the kind of like proven benefits that you really always get are quality and time. Cost is variable depending on the project, whether it's more, it's less, it's the same. And similar to why you see, I think, multifamily having pushed so substantially towards more industrialized methods, it's really the same in single family for rent, where we've got a 225 unit project that will start next year. The combined time savings on all of those units is months for the general contractor who we're working with, and then the institutional owner. And those months translate to months of rent, months of general conditions. And so there's very real dollar incentive to reduce cycle time. And reducing cycle time saves you as a developer a ton of money. And, to Rick's point, ultimately all has to come down to dollars and cents. And I think within single family for rent is a place where those dollars and cents make a ton of sense.
Yeah, that's great. Those are great points. So Jeff, I was really interested in what you said about how you staged inspections so that you could do more completion, so that you didn't deliver with windows at first, and then you took baby steps of, okay, now I'm going to put windows in. And we have a question in the chat about what's stopping us from moving to more higher, more complete panels with more features installed in the factory. So we already heard that, right? The inspectors needing to see more of the process, but you told us how you got there. Are there any other things that stand in the way of greater completion of panels delivered? And that question also goes to you, Rick.
So I think it really comes down to two things. I mean, the first is inspections. As we talked about before, I think particularly within like a closed wall panel context, which is something we've experimented with a bit, it frequently falls into a regulatory gray area in terms of inspections. Here in Colorado, we have a very clear regulatory framework for volumetric modular. We have very clear regulatory framework for site inspections in each municipality. But if you're enclosing that panel in any kind of way, you're somewhere in between and it doesn't really fit. And so it's a real barrier. I think that is ultimately a solvable barrier. Here in Colorado, we've worked a lot with our, state factory housing group to sort of understand some of those barriers, limitations, how we might be able to address them as we try and potentially add more value to our components going forward. So I think that is solvable. I think the second piece really comes down to, back to, I think, our earlier conversation around trades and scope of work and handoffs and risk and all of that. There's, I think folks who've, a lot of what we're doing is inspired by, European offsite construction methods, where you'll see really high levels of finish. You'll see panels with sort of MEP in the panels. You'll see, a lot more complexity coming out of the factory. I think that some of that could make sense if you were to just whiteboard it out, but it requires different scopes of work. It requires a negotiation between the builder, who's manufacturing and who's installing. You know, if you're pre-wiring panels, you know, you've got to negotiate with the electrical sub to say, hey, you know, all this work's done in the factory, so give me a break of this amount of money. And that's hard to do. And so I think a lot of that comes down to, you know, for us, our hypothesis there is that, you know, the solution is being turnkey. The solution is owning the field labor as well. And for us, I think to the extent that over time we add more value in our factory, that will also correspond with us adding more value in the field, because it's just kind of a hard hurdle to get over otherwise.
Yeah,
Isn't there also a distance factor as to how far you can take a panel before the windows break and the doors get wompy jawed?
Yes and no. I mean, as long as you're designing engineering the right way. I mean, we have, you know, built hundreds at this point, and we have not had you know, window get broken even when we shipped halfway across Colorado. And there's folks who are shipping, you know, pretty highly finished panels all across the country. So the bigger issue is less of trucking there. It's often more climate. There's been some very, very, you know, expensive mistakes folks have made in bringing, you know, product from like a Phoenix to the Pacific Northwest, you know, where you've got such vastly different climate and the wood gets real wonky and weird on you. So I think the transportation piece is, there's a barrier there, but it's, yeah, I mean, the transportation piece really just comes down to trade-offs. You know, sometimes it makes sense to ship more air because you add more value. Sometimes it makes sense to ship less air and add more value on site.
Yeah, and just to jump in from the builder's perspective on what Jeff was sort of mentioning as far as the complications of, you know, taking the next step and putting MEPs into the panels and insulating them and even drywalling them. I mean, from the builder's perspective, I mean, one, what's the benefit, right? I mean, we don't want to do things just to do them. And so obviously alongside of, you know, that progression, there would need to be some benefit to the builder and to the end user. And, you know, I hate to keep bringing it back to cost, but that's usually the first place we look, right? The risks for us are also sort of, as Jeff pointed out, we as builders, I mean, we deal with it all the time as it is today. The finger pointing, you know, this issue happened on site. Well, was it this trade or this trade? Whose responsibility was it? And so, yeah, there definitely would have to be a shift in scopes of work and contracting. And, you know, the solution is either, yeah, have it very nailed down in contracts and try to figure it out that way with the electrical sub and the plumbing sub, which feels really muddy and messy. Or as Jeff mentioned, you know, as panel companies get to the point where you're also providing those things. You're not just the framer, you're not just the window installer, you're not just the sider, but now you're doing mechanicals, you're doing, you know, insulation throughout the house. If you're willing to take all of that on from the builder's perspective, you know, you've sort of solved one of those really big, I mean, that's a really big concern from the builder's perspective, because we hate standing in the middle between our trades, trying to play judge and jury over who did what wrong and who's got to, you know, fork up financially is where that conversation usually goes. So, you know, until if panel companies are ready to take that step, then I think that we can head down that path. But, you know, from the builder's perspective, it's a real tough sell, you know, until we get to that point, I think.
And I think incumbent upon all of this is we need more builders like Rick. I think people who truly understand construction science and understand how things come together. You hear a lot of phrases sometimes about the phrase briefcase builder, you know, the person who finds the plot of land and then outsources 100% of the project without really thinking and counting on all those people to be the experts to take care of their own little purposes. With more holistically oriented builders who do understand more of the actual process of building, you know, who can talk to a Jeff and understand, you know, some of the implications. I think that ultimately we will come closer to industrialized construction because ultimately those builders will realize that there are better ways to do things than how they're doing them now.
So to that point, how do we get more of you, Rick? How do we convince more builders to be like you? What do you think is the most effective initial message to you?
Well, I appreciate the praise, but there's a lot of other builders out there that are doing just what McStain's doing and have been doing it for longer. So, I don't think we're a unicorn by any case. There's a lot of great builders out there that are conscientious and trying to do what we're doing. I'd love to see the small private builder segment of our industry grow, and all of a sudden, companies like us are the big ones. But, is that realistic given our current environment where so much, especially here I know in our market, is dominated by the big publics? I think it's, I don't think you're going to see a bunch of McStains that grow to take over the industry. I think really where the tide is going to turn is adoption from these bigger builders of the process. And so, I think what it's going to come back down to, likely to get a few of them over the goal line, is doing a good job of selling the benefits, selling the cost savings, getting more of the labor force on board so that they're realizing the benefits too. I mean, it's sort of one of those, we're going to reach a critical mass at some point is really what I think is going to have to happen. And there are builders out there that are big, working in different markets that are doing industrialized, panelized construction. And I think that, there will be more. It certainly seems like, given enough time and, as the labor issues that we've all been talking about for a decade plus now continue to get worse, I think the hand is going to be forced at some point, because there's only so many framers to go around. You're going to have to figure out a way to use them more efficiently. And so I think that's where this will start to come in. If all of a sudden framing labor costs are, doubling, well, boy, that is sure going to get the attention of, purchasing departments at big builders. And that's going to maybe be the trigger point that, causes them to look a little bit harder at this sort of thing. I also think that, as, we talked about build for rent, a lot of bigger builders are getting into the build for rent. And maybe this is, kind of a couple trains coming to the station at the right time, where panelization makes a ton of sense for build for rent. And as these bigger builders dip their toes into build for rent, whether as a GC or doing the whole project themselves, I think they might be more willing to give this a shot, and, hopefully they have a good experience. And I think I could see it growing that way.
Awesome. Yeah, I think you guys have given us a lot of opportunity to understand how to help. Dennis, I believe the audience question time is up. Please take it away.
Yeah, no, this has been fantastic. Apologies to have to cut it short. Actually, I think we could keep this going for a little while, but I appreciate everyone's time here. This has been a really a great conversation. And I've noticed, Rick, that you seem to be sitting, I think you're sitting on site right now, if I recognize the model home correctly, right? Yeah. So for those of you who are interested to follow a little bit more of Rick and Jeff's journey, we were actually out in Denver a few weeks, about a month ago now. And we participated in a site visit when Simple Homes was flying in a few panels for McStain communities. We also had a chance to visit with Jeff and his team at the factory. And we were able to involve a group of students from the University of Denver's undergrad and graduate program to kind of facilitate a Q&A around the future career opportunities in offsite construction and home building. So a lot of interesting perspectives being shared there, some great conversation that we're excited to push out into our network. And again, thanks to everyone on this panel for being a part of the conversation today. There will be a recap that we push out here within 24 to 48 hours. It'll give you a quick snapshot of the key points that were discussed and the video content from today's session. Before we break, I do want to just highlight our next event. So the third Tuesday in November, we will have our year-end event. It will be kicked off with John Burns from John Burns Real Estate Consulting as the keynote, kind of give us his view of kind of where are we, where are we heading. Be followed by a healthy debate between John and some of his peers from across the industry. We'll have representation from the capital stakeholder group, as well as national and regional builders, and the venture capital segment of our industry. Kind of, again, just to talk through John's predictions and kind of share their thoughts on that as well. We're also going to dig deeper into what's going on in the supply chain. And that's not just in context of the home builders business environment, but in all of our lives. And we're going to have a futuristic approach or a futurist approach to kind of what are some of the scenarios that can play out and how might that impact us beyond what we've seen today, and be able to tie that back to the home building industry as well. And then we're also going to get into ESG and what that means. I was out at the EVA event a few weeks ago, and G. Myers and a few folks did a great job of kind of breaking this down. You can't turn the page of the Wall Street Journal without seeing it at least 6 times. So what is it? What does it mean for our business, and what does it mean for our industry over the next few years? So that's going to be packed into a 5-hour long half-day event, again, on that third Tuesday in November. You can register on our website, and we look forward to seeing you there. With that, thanks, everyone. Appreciate your time today, and we'll be in touch.
Thanks, Dennis.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dennis.